All right, I think without further ado, we're going to start our second panel of the day. So I'm Neil Tracy. I'm a correspondent here at the Capital Forum, where I cover international trade. And it's my pleasure to be moderating our panel today on the end of de minimis in the U.S., how that's playing out, affecting American businesses, workers, and consumers, as well as some interesting changes coming down the pipe in Europe and what to look for there. That, that being said, we have a lot of ground to cover today and some very exciting panelists, so I'm going to introduce our guests today. I'm joined by Kimberly Glass, who is the president and CEO of the National Council of Textile Organizations, where she represents a broad spectrum of the domestic textile industry. I'm joined by Courtney Griffin, who is the Director of Consumer Product Safety at the Consumer Federation of America and advocates for consumer product safety in Congress and at regulatory agencies and collaborates with a lot of different stakeholders. Jacob Jensen is a trade policy analyst at the American Action Forum, where he specializes in statistical analysis and has been following de minimis closely. Mike Mullen is the executive director of the Express Association of America, where he represents the logistics and industry. And then Yves Mellon is an international trade and customs lawyer based in Brussels, where he's a partner at Cassidy Levy Kent. Yves is also the vice president of CONFIAD, which is the European Associations of Custom Representatives. So just to level set, earlier this spring, the Trump administration ended the de minimis exemption for China and Hong Kong, and that exemption provided for duty-free access for goods valued under $800 and also reduced reporting requirements that you typically have to report to customs when you bring something into the U.S. So, Kim, I'll start with you. And then I should say, following in August, they also ended de minimis for all of the countries. So, Kim, starting with you, how are you seeing this play out? How is this affecting the businesses that you represent? And what have you seen so far?
Well, thanks for having me here. Thank you all for attending. We were strong advocates, the domestic textile industry, which I represent, which employs 471,000 workers across the United States. And many people think we are an industry that's long gone. No, we are a very innovative industry here on shore. We're the second largest exporter in the world of textiles. Our industry has been severely harmed by the de minimis loophole. We have been calling for its closure for 8 years. When I used to talk to reporters at the Wall Street Journal, they were like, de minimis what? No idea what it was. As time went on, there was strong advocacy on both sides of Capitol Hill, from Chairman Jason Smith from the Ways and Means Committee to Earl Blumenauer, the Democrats. De minimis became an avalanche of duty-free trade to the United States marketplace that we could not control. It was a wildfire out of control. You cannot inspect 1.4 billion packages coming in a year and climbing into the United States marketplace. Half of the packages were estimated to be textile and apparel products. When did Congress sign a free trade agreement with the world that as long as you send it in a small package, you get duty-free access? It undermined all trade regimes from Biden to the Trump administration. And it became an avalanche, a wave. It was just not our voice in the U.S. textile industry. Fentanyl families came forward. Kids who ordered something like Adderall off Snapchat didn't know that it was laced with fentanyl, dying because these packages were coming uninspected to their doorstep. So what have we seen so far? I have a lot to say. As you can see, I'm pretty passionate about this issue. In this particular environment, with so much going on in the trade world, I would love to say we've opened 10 new factories as a result of the de minimis closure. But there's been so much uncertainty related to reciprocity tariffs, USMCA, which we just announced, which is a huge export market for U.S. textiles, that we haven't seen immediate satisfaction in what we hope to see. We believe that if agreements are struck with our Western Hemisphere partners, we're going to start seeing immediate reshoring and nearshoring of these important textiles.
Thank you. I think, Mike, I'll actually kick it over to you now. I'm going to jump around a little bit because I'd love to hear another sort of industry perspective. What are you seeing in terms of how this is affecting the businesses that you represent?
Today, Neil. Oh, thank you. And I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. As Neil said, I'm the executive director of the Express Association of America, which represents FedEx, UPS, and DHL. And we certainly have seen a major impact from the elimination of de minimis. Shipments under $800 are now entered as informal entries. And that's a somewhat more complicated bureaucratic process. You have to provide more information about the shipment, including the country of origin and an HTS number. And CBP is estimating that there are close to 1 million shipments a day under $800 that are still coming into the U.S. as some other form of entry, mostly informal entry. But of course, in 2024, when de minimis hit its high point of 1.4 billion shipments, that was nearly 4 million a day. So, as I said, it requires a lot more time to get a shipment across the border now. You have to, we have this major education process going with our members to get them up to speed on the fact that they have to provide more information than they used to in the past. And that's causing some major backlogs. Holds on shipments under $800 have increased by 75% in the United States. And most of these holds are imposed by the express companies themselves because they've hired several thousand more people to assist with this process of tracking down the information, and that usually involves getting someone on the telephone, and it can take some time. The elimination of de minimis had a major disruption on the U.S. Post Office. Right after de minimis was eliminated, nearly 30 major post offices around the world said they would not accept low-value shipments that were en route to the United States. Now, some of those have come back online, and they are shipping again, but the postal volume is still very low. CBP has provided the post office with a simplified way of collecting the tariffs they need to collect, and they've also designated several logistics firms who are eligible to collect tariffs on behalf of the post office. But there's an impact on consumers as well, which is not really fully known yet. We've only been doing this since the end of August, after all. But there was a story in the New York Times last week about a woman in California who had to pay over $250 in tariffs on a $456 trench coat from the Netherlands that had been made in China. So the total price was over $700. So we've heard some other anecdotes from consumers about getting those kind of sticker shock tariff bills, and we're just going to see how that plays out in the future.
Thank you for that. Jacob, this dovetails well into what you've looked at a little bit. What do you think the effect of prices for consumers is going to be?
Yeah, and thanks for having me. Well, I come from a different perspective. I look at the costs for consumers and businesses for ending de minimis as a whole. There's a few different factors at play that we have to consider. First is there's the tariffs themselves. The average effective tariff rate right now in the U.S. is somewhere between 14 and 16%. So that gives somewhat of a picture on what the average import tax will be for most of these de minimis shipments going forward. Obviously, that'll differ from country to country and what product is being imported. But even more important to consider than the tariffs themselves is the various administrative and processing fees that are tacked on to each individual shipment. The Customs and Border Protection has a merchandise processing fee. That ranges anywhere from around $2 to $10 per package. So that right there is a huge sticker shock. Other studies also factor in added brokerage costs, increased shipping costs, and different regulatory burdens that each shipment now has an additional $20 cost tacked on in addition to tariffs. So I did a study last September that put the low-end estimate to consumers at $8 billion annually. That kind of tracks with what other economists have said. There's another study out there that puts it at $10 to $12 billion annually. The U.S. government itself did a study that puts it around $7.9 billion at a low-end estimate, and that's what I've been looking at.
Gorney, I'd love to hear from you because you represent consumers and you look at not just price but also consumer product safety. And how do you guys think about de minimis and some of the safety issues there?
Right. First of all, thank you, Neil and Capital Forum, for holding this and letting Consumer Federation of America participate. It's a really important conversation, and it is important to center consumers in this conversation. Consumer Federation of America is a nonprofit association of about 200 state, local, and national groups. And I'm the director of consumer product safety, so I'm coming at this from a consumer product safety lens. What were the issues that, at least in that arena, led us to this moment? And as Kimberly identified in her opening remarks, what was not initially envisioned for these purposes became a avenue by which consumers were accessing ultra cheap direct to consumer products. But what we know is that this also opened up a shadow channel by which Americans were being exposed to unsafe, non-compliant, sometimes illegal consumer products, maybe unaware that the products that they are introducing into their homes, that they are giving to their children, do not meet robust U.S. safety standards, and in fact could present an injury to a loved one. And so our position is that de minimis was an avenue that bad actors were using to take advantage and to sell products that maybe a domestic seller would be unable to. So not only did this create an unfair situation, as Kimberly identified, but it also created an unsafe situation where consumers their health and safety were undermined. But I do want to add a caveat to my remarks, because while we can identify the scourge of illegal, non-compliant product that was being able to enter American homes by this particular avenue, I will say that chaos, especially chaos in trade policy, has serious implications for consumers, both from an affordability standpoint, but also from like a scam and fraud standpoint. And so whenever we see any kind of rollout that is abrupt, that doesn't have sufficient parameters to protect consumers, there is always a fear that there will be additional avenues for people to take advantage of consumers.
Thank you. And then, Eva, I'd love to hear from you. How does this map onto the sort of debates that you're hearing in Europe? What sort of similarities do you see, or differences as well?
Sounds very similar. Thanks for having me. First, very glad to be here from the Brussels bubble into, I guess, the DC bubble. We see exactly the same type of issues in Europe. That has kept me busy, very busy in the past few years as a customs lawyer in Belgium. What I've seen, the de minimis rule and cross-border e-commerce for low-value consignment, which is how we would describe that in Europe, is that it brings two major changes. It removes the established distributor. So it places a Chinese seller directly in contact with consumers in Europe. So you do not have anybody that takes care of regulatory compliance. And over the years, this has meant that products just don't comply. And recently, the French customs have stopped 200,000 parcels from, I think, Temu or Shein. 80% of them were non-compliant. And that's what the customs official could see. So maybe 100% were not compliant. And so this I've seen in my practice when my customer representative clients have some of their the products they handle stopped when the customs officials opened the box. It's all sorts of things. We don't have a lot of drugs. So that's not the narrative in Europe. The issue is more fair competition and consumer safety. The other thing that cross-border e-commerce does is it replaces containers, millions of containers, by billions of parcels. And in effect, customs will tell you, it doesn't matter if I check 10% of those parcels. I never have a sample. Each box has a different product. They don't check 10%. They check 0.003%, something like this. And so, in effect, it means customs are not able to control those parcels. And so, when things are not controlled, over time, people know it. And then, essentially, if you want to import things in fraud of anything, you sell it or online. And that's what we've seen. So their level of compliance is very, very low. An example in textile, which is extremely revealing, I think, there is in Europe an obligation to recycle textile products. So in practice, you never throw clothing away in the bin. You put them in those boxes, and then they get collected, and most of them are actually recycled into fibers. The volume of those doubled, more than doubled in the past few years. And the quality is so low that it can't be used anymore. And so the issue is really systemic. I can relate. And we still have the de minimis in Europe. It's not $800, it's 150 euros, so a bit less than $200. But we are seriously considering removing de minimis because of those issues.
Yeah, thank you. Kim, I'd love to kick it over to you. I'll go down the line, and if anybody has something that they want to respond to, I'd love to hear that. Is there anything that jumps out to you talking about that you've heard that you'd love to talk about?
Yeah, just a couple things in terms of consumer prices. I can bore you to death with Excel spreadsheets right now showing you the import price of different products like cotton T-shirts, synthetic T-shirts, woven bottoms. We are at rock bottom pricing right now, regardless of the reciprocity tariffs and regardless that de minimis has ended. We are paying less for apparel today than in the 1990s. You can buy a $3 synthetic shirt made from anywhere in the world, likely with Chinese components. So there's been a cost associated with it. When I go to my members, and I've lost 37 textile plants, the most innovative plants in the world, to compete on the most unlevel playing field in the world over the last 2 years. This is the very industry that made that life-saving PPE, and we're called on in the Trump administration to reconvert our supply chains because all that went offshore to say, guys, this is not a priority for other stakeholders, and consumers aren't a priority. Thank God this has ended. Congress has passed legislation that regardless if this is overturned in the Supreme Court as a result of the IEEPA tariff, that there's enough notice out to the globe that this is going to end in July 1st, 2027. Now, we hope that if the Supreme Court case does not prevail, that the administration will reinstitute a ban on de minimis. They have executive authorities under Section 321 that created de minimis. De minimis was intended in the 1930s for grandma from Canada to send her granddaughter a sweater. Little trinkets from abroad. It was never intended to be a duty-free loophole for the rest of the world, inability to enforce the Uyghur Forced Labor Act. I think our European colleague here said it right. I mean, there's no way you can open up 1.4 billion boxes. So what's going to happen? Yeah, people have to give information. Where was this manufactured? An HTS code. We have the most sophisticated logistics companies up here. This happens all the time. And instead of sending it in through an individual box and box and box that CBP has the inability to enforce, it goes onto a regular shipment where you can pull a sample and say, hey, is this complying with our consumer product safety? The last thing I would note is the U.S.-China Commission, which is a bipartisan commission appointed by our top leadership in Congress, did a whole hearing on de minimis and consumer product safety. It's astonishing to think that parents installed a pool filter that killed a child because it was lacked the ability to inspect coming in through the de minimis environment. Would you want to give your new baby a pacifier that came in through de minimis? I don't think so. There were chemicals that were sprayed on kids' toys that were not even detected, meaning, what is this chemical compound? So yes, we require more information. Yes, you're going to have to pay a tariff. Yes, these products are abundantly cheap online. You can still access them. I doubt all the kind of boogeyman arguments I strongly reject, and I'm grateful for that this administration and the U.S. Congress decided this nightmare needed to end.
I'll just tag along that in the pool drain cover that you're referencing had also been banned for many, many years. There is no world in which that product should have been sold, and it was banned after it had killed many children through just horrific, gruesome deaths. So I think that this really illustrates the reality of what was happening with de minimis. But I will say there are a couple pieces that I kind of want to tease out that have been hinted at around the margins. The first is, well, this hasn't really been hinted at, but I will say it. While de minimis and closing this loophole may solve some issues, it's really one piece in the puzzle. And there are other pieces that we do need to be sensitive to and we need to be working on. The first is, are there resources for enforcement efforts? Because does it matter that this loophole has closed if the agencies that are working on customs, are working on consumer product safety, do not have the resources to do the inspections, to do enforcement efforts? Secondarily, are the data systems adequate? The Consumer Product Safety Commission has some changes in the upcoming 2 years about how certificates of compliance are going to be filed. These are really important measures to ensure that these changes actually work. And then third, and maybe in my mind most importantly, there's an elephant in the room that we haven't identified, and that is kind of the lack of online marketplace accountability. And so how are these products making their way to American consumers? What is the gateway by which American consumers are interacting with maybe bad faith third-party sellers on online marketplaces? And do our regulatory agencies have the resources, and are they empowered to hold these online marketplaces accountable? My opinion, no, they do not. And this is an important piece in the puzzle when we consider, are Americans being unnecessarily exposed to unsafe, non-compliant product?
Go ahead.
I guess what I'll add on to the affordability topic is that most households that will be impacted by the end of de minimis are low-income households. About 70% or more of de minimis shipments go to low-income households. So this is in effect a regressive tax, looking at it from that perspective. But it impacts almost every household in the United States. But then there's two arguments that seem to be at play here. One is the cheap goods argument, which kind of goes into a tariff discussion, and then there's the other one, which is about counterfeit goods and illicit goods, which is a separate discussion about screening. And I think no one was arguing that there shouldn't be any screening. Most de minimis shipments go through Type 86 entry. I believe it's the vast majority, which does track information on country of origin, seller information, buyer information. So it's not like these goods are just freely flowing through the United States with no data collected whatsoever. Most of the congressional legislation is very much arguing for HTS codes to be attached to these goods, which is very good for tracking what tariff you have to pay, but it's not very good at tracking what illicit goods are in these packages. So putting an HTS code on something will help with revenue collection. Not so sure it'll help crack down on illicit drugs, counterfeit goods, things of that nature.
Yeah, so I would just add that nobody is more dedicated to stopping the flow of illicit goods into the United States than the express industry is. We've invested billions of dollars in people and technology and training specifically for the purpose of running risk assessments on the shipments coming through our networks. And before CBP created the ACE system to do their own risk assessment, they used to use the systems in our hubs to make their selections and examine systems over which they had any doubt. So we totally support the effort to stop the flow of illicit goods. And we work very closely with agencies like FDA. FDA runs annual audits on our manifest to make sure that we haven't missed any products that they're supposed to review, and that we are routing everything that comes in that's an FDA-regulated product over there for their review. I just wanted to talk about some other numbers, if you'll bear with me for a minute. So 2024 was the last full year of de minimis. There were 1.4 billion de minimis shipments into the U.S. And has been noted that that's a challenge for CBP. They definitely had trouble with clearing that number of shipments. And a lot of them were coming from parties that didn't provide the kind of high-quality information that the express industry does. A lot of it was coming through the post office, which provides very sketchy information. The average value of these shipments, according to CBP, was $50. So that means the total value of the de minimis shipments in 2024 was $70 billion. So that was $70 billion out of $3.3 trillion of U.S. goods imports, which is about 2.1%. That was the volume that was coming into the U.S. economy through de minimis in the last full year of it.
Eve, before we go to you, I'd love to know, because obviously you guys have a different perspective, if you have a response to, I'll turn to you, Kim, if you have a response to both sort of the arguments that there is some consumer safety product screening in de minimis, and that the express companies themselves are able to do some screening there.
I'm grateful for the express companies having various software and ability to target, but no one supports in the U.S. Congress that passed overwhelmingly, with a few detractors, supports reinstituting these programs even after the express carriers made it very clear about their targeting methodologies. The sad part is I've talked to customs officers in the field. Some of them are at express carriers, some of them are at other locations. And a lot of them lost sleep at night about what they were asked to approve manifest. Boxes were coming in. There's no way with the avalanche of boxes and even with the top technology without the information needed. And I agree. Some small packages are still coming in, and guess what? They're not what they perceive to be. They're saying it's a T-shirt. It could be completely illegal drugs. It could be something else. It could be baby's products that's unsafe. But the reality is we need to give customs a shot at trying to enforce this. We have good officers in the field. We have good express carriers in the field working hard to try to stop the bad stuff coming in. 92% of the cargo shipments coming into the United States were de minimis packages. That is crazy. When you talk about the Cleveland airport, the Chinese air shipments coming overnight of just de minimis boxes with manifests just saying this is a T-shirt, this is a baby's item, no information where it was made, no HTS code, none of that, and being rewarded with duty-free treatment to the U.S. marketplace, undermining U.S. jobs. It's one thing, I would say my industry, we are a deflationary industry. We are absolutely a deflationary industry. You can go out and look at apparel today at all the major retail, and you can see the prices. And if you can pull up an old credit card receipt, you'll see like you're paying such a complete difference. What is the cost of not having middle-class jobs here in the United States and ability to buy products? And that's what my industry, supports a lot of communities in rural America, North Carolina, Georgia. And when these factories go down, there is no tax base. So I think, and I'm just one industry that's been impacted. There's been a variety, but we're committed to helping the administration get the tools. Courtney's raising a great point. CBP needs more tools in the toolbox, especially now with a variety of different trade regimes and reciprocity tariffs to ensure that these illicit products aren't coming in.
So just one quick comment on that, Neil. That 92% number comes from counting the number of shipments. So what it's doing is if a pair of shoes comes in a single box, that's counted as one shipment. And if an ocean carrier full of 10,000 pairs of shoes comes in that's also counted as one shipment. And those two are equated. And that's how you get to the number that 92% were de minimis shipments. But of course, that's a number that only matters to CBP. It's not a way to measure the value of these things. As I pointed out, the value of de minimis shipments was only 2% of U.S. imports.
Eva, I'd love to hear from you. How is Brussels thinking about handling some of, you said a lot of similar issues, right? So how does the approach sort of proposed compare? How is it similar? Where does it differ? If you could sort of walk us through that would be great.
Yeah, first I hear 1 billion parcels. In Europe, we are between 4 and 5, so much more, below 150 euro. So it becomes percentages like 5, 6, 7. I mean, it becomes very big for cheap products, and so they are not competing just with high street stores, but with like discount stores, and so it made me realize that actually we are in deeper trouble than you were. Wanted also to say that this is largely fed by Chinese manufacturers, possibly by the Chinese government as well. There is an intentionality behind it. I'm from southern Belgium. One of the main entry for those products is in Liège. I guess our Cleveland is Liège, and so I'm swimming in that environment, and people go to China, come back. There's a reason it's in Liège, because there's a lot of trying to attract Chinese investment. Alibaba chose the place for its big distribution center. For years, I've heard things like, it's intentional. It's subsidization of the Chinese express companies and the logisticians. And this week, the European Union just launched a foreign subsidy regulation investigation into TMU, just precisely for that. How can you be that cheap? Just to understand whether there is a state intervention behind it. So there is intentionality behind it. Third thing I wanted to say, it can't happen without using customer representatives. And if you have lower volumes, it could be because you have better customer representatives than we have. And I know that for a fact, because in Belgium, I can make you customer representative in 3 months. It's very easy. And then I've seen people like this. They were authorized to import, and in a matter of 6 months, they had imported 60 million of low-value consignments, and they had no training at all. They had no lawyer. They had no tax advisor. And they actually had been in the middle of fraud, where low-value consignments were declared below 150 when they were actually higher, and it had been made in fraud to VAT, so no sales tax. And that happens a lot in Belgium, a lot in the Netherlands, in lots of places where goods enter the EU. Why have we allowed this to happen for so long? I think there is an issue of understanding this fraud and communication between people who know the fraud. The fraudsters are the first ones, and then customer representatives are next. So the local communities are next. They see things if they have the expertise, and by the time the people who actually make the laws understand what's going on, it's 4 or 5 years. And 4 or 5 years ago, cross-border e-commerce was 10% what it is today. 10 years ago, it did not exist. So it was not really possible to buy something from China and have it delivered to your doorstep in 72 hours. So I think now what the EU understands what is behind the fraud and how to fight it. How to fight it is to have customer representatives that work better. And so we've had for the past 2 years a proposed reformed customs code of the European Union. proposed by the European Commission. I will not bore you with the details of how a piece of legislation gets adopted in Europe, but just to say you need a Commission proposal, and then the member states in the Council and the European Parliament need to agree on a text. And we are in the very last stages of that process, so we sort of know what things will look like. And so first, any customer representative involved in this type of trade will have to be an authorized economic operator. Authorized, very, very short leash. Make 3 mistakes, you lose your authorization. And so the idea is that nobody will declare those type of goods except if you have quality data. On the data is appallingly bad. Even for low value consignment, where the customer's value is actually the price already paid by the consumer under the scheme that we have, the IOSS. The product has been sold, so you know what it is. You know the value. And that data is not in the hands of the people who make the declarations. Never, even the most compliant ones. And that is a major risk. And so tomorrow, with this increased responsibility on customer representatives, I think that will stop. Also, the EU is making the platform the importer. And so Alibaba, Amazon, you make this product available online. You're going to be responsible for fiscal compliance, so all the duties, but also for all regulatory compliance. So you're like a supermarket. And if you end up selling something that's not compliant, you will have to recall the product, just like if you were Walmart. So that's also one of the changes the EU is proposing.
Thank you. I would love to hear from you, Kim. I think one thing that was interesting that came up in that is this idea of there's a little bit of a deliberate push, right, for a lot of these when we've seen this flood of de minimis parcels. If you could speak a little bit more towards that, if you have any reaction to that, and then secondly, if this is something that your member organizations are watching this change in Europe, and if so, what do you make of it?
No, I mean, Europe has also, we've been following the press very closely, both as an industry, but here in the United States, about the struggles that the EU has faced as a result of de minimis, which is very similar, not 100% concurrent, but very similar to here in the United States. And we've also seen a wave of other countries move forward with de minimis reform, South Africa, Brazil. No one's looking to expand de minimis. Everyone's looking to close it because of the very issues that we're facing, both economic, consumer product safety, and even for our market, illicit drugs. So, it's not astonishing to me that that you have 4 to 5 billion packages a year, given the size of the EU. And if there's a loophole, people will find it to your market. And that has serious repercussions. Under our de minimis laws prior to it being closed, we had the same struggles, right? Amazon or whoever would sell the product, but there's no culpability in this environment to hold anybody accountable. Well, that's horrible to tell somebody, the police or the sheriffs who are trying to track down fentanyl or a legal product coming in, that I can't hold anybody accountable. I don't even know where to look. It's an opaque system meant to kind of obfuscate where the particular product's coming in. And I know there's bad actors who use our regular trade environment outside of de minimis who want to sell illegal things. But astonishingly, we were told a story by CBP that there was a stolen helicopter broken into 100 different parts, sent in through de minimis packages. I mean, that is wild to me, of how de minimis can be manipulated into things that you're like, how did anyone even think of doing that? That CBP ended up catching. CBP started raising the alarm more on fentanyl. They would find that at JFK and some of our massive de minimis hubs, that these were labeled as different products and that pallets were coming in, and that it was impossible for them to enforce. So it started putting out things publicly saying that about the enforcement challenges in this de minimis environment. So I appreciate all the work that you're doing in the EU. I think we've been following it closely, been maybe inspired to act here as a result of some of the complications you're facing as well.
Yeah. I'll kick it over to Mike because you also represent businesses that, do business in Europe. So is this something that that the organizations you represent, are they watching it? And what do they make of it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, illicit goods of all kinds, including drugs, are built into our algorithms and our targeting systems. And we cooperate very closely with customs organizations. Here in the U.S., we have customs officers actually stationed in our hubs and facilities 24 hours a day. And we support their blitz operations, and we help them find things in a lot of different ways. I hear all kinds of anecdotes about, there was this illicit product and this product caused this problem, but I'm just not hearing much data here today. I know that CBP's drug seizure dashboard, which you can go to cbp.org and or .gov and take a look at it. They say that 99% of the finished fentanyl is coming across the southwest land border, and the majority of that is in privately owned vehicles. It's stuffed in people's trunks and under their back seats. Very little of it is actually even cargo shipments. Take IPR seizures. Certainly, counterfeit goods are a major source of products that could possibly hurt a consumer. According to the data CBP puts out, about 50% of the IPR seizures are made in the air cargo and postal environment each year, and the other 50% are in ocean cargo and trucks. So all that's saying is a smuggler will use any channel he thinks is going to be successful to get products into the United States. As I said, de minimis was a challenge because the number was large, but the amount of stuff that's in each product was small. But that's the challenge for CBP with that, even with all our help, was large. And that was a reason why it was eliminated. So now it's eliminated. So apparently we don't need to worry about that anymore. I think we should talk more about what's going to happen going forward.
Well, that's probably a pretty good segue into the one last thing that I want to hear from all of you, which is, is this a settled issue? If not, what do you expect to change, and what are you going to continue to push on?
As I mentioned before, the Supreme Court is looking at the president's authorities to use IEEPA tariffs, and part of the way he closed de minimis through executive action was using his emergency powers. So if the courts end up overturning IEEPA, then this de minimis closure through executive action will also be overturned. So de minimis could be off and on, and then potentially he could use other authorities under Section 321 to close de minimis. So we don't really know. I think the Congress has spoken very clearly. Obviously, this is closing July 1st, 2027 regardless. But, there's still uncertainty associated with how long this closure could be in effect, at least in the current phase.
Well, as I already said, I do not think this solves consumer product safety in the United States. And as to further illustrate that, and the need for there to be appropriate resources to protect consumers, in fiscal year 2023, the Consumer Product Safety Commission, which is co-located with CBP at ports of entry, had less than 50 staff members at ports of entry. And that's really a damning number when you think that this is the agency tasked with protecting us from unreasonable risk of injury or death. And if we have a comprehensive implementation of changes, it needs to include adequate resources to make sure that consumers are protected moving forward. Additionally, I will say that I really do believe that this online marketplace accountability piece is really important, and many of the consumer groups in the US, the EU, the UK are coalescing around this idea that our regulatory authorities are not empowered to hold online marketplaces accountable for their selling partners that they're engaging with, but also the products that they're platforming. This summer, the Transatlantic Consumer Dialogue, which is a forum of US, EU, UK consumer groups, put out a report that talks about the scourge of unsafe product that is getting into all three regions from online marketplaces, and in particular third-party sellers. And despite the varying regulatory and legal frameworks that we're all living in, we all coalesce around the idea that we need to hold these marketplaces accountable. They are letting unsafe, non-compliant product into our countries, and we need to do something about it.
Yeah, I don't think this is a settled issue. One thing we've learned in recent years is Americans and American consumers don't like high prices. So if they find out that current tariff policy or the de minimis policy is helping raise prices, that might be an issue going forward into the midterms. Small businesses also, Americans tend to really care about small businesses. They've been heavily impacted by the end of de minimis and tariff policy, losing hundreds of thousands of jobs in the recent months. So I don't think it's a settled issue. I'm looking forward to seeing if maybe deals could be made with our allies in the EU with current trade deals. Maybe certain de minimis exemptions could be made with the EU separately than with other countries like China to kind of crack down on these issues.
Well, I think the main thing of the kind of chaos that exists at the border right now is that de minimis was eliminated at the same time that a large number of additional tariffs were being implemented. And that's complexity is what's causing the major problems. There are a lot of different tariffs that a customs broker now has to sit down and figure out how they apply to a $50 shipment. So there's the reciprocal tariffs, there's many 301 tariffs on these goods. We now have to figure out what the value is of any aluminum or steel that's in a product so that we can apply the 232 aluminum and steel tariffs to it. If it's a shirt with steel buttons or something, all that has to be figured out. So I think what we'd really like to see in the express industry is a more simplified approach that will help both CBP and U.S. business and the U.S. consumer. In other words, you could simplify the tariffs in some way so that the government still gets all the revenue that it's expecting. And at the same time, you can ensure that you're only allowing these shipments to come through highly secure channels where the importer or the carrier has a very strong ability to work with CBP to intercept these illicit goods. And that's what we'd like to see this evolve into, a more straightforward and simple process that gets the governor their revenue and also ensures the security of the goods.
Yeah, on the fact that it makes products more expensive, for sure. Today, a teenager can buy cosmetics for almost nothing and receive it, and it's there in a few days. But these things are not safe, and it's just sometimes just too cheap. And if consumers or businesses need more money to spend, maybe you can reduce taxes, right? I mean, that's the other way to look at it. And having a part of the industry that competes because it doesn't pay any taxes doesn't seem fair, and plus it concentrates all of this fraud. Goods will continue to be sold online. The issue is by whom, right? And the EU is trying to, in one of those meetings with the Commission, they were joking that the B2C, so business to consumer, should become back to container. We want the containers to come in, and then they're going to be distributed from here. And that's the direction of travel in Europe. It's to try to discourage cross-border trade, especially for B2C goods like this, especially from China. So I'm sure there will be opportunities to discuss with countries like the US and the UK, but not on the de minimis, not on the on the not paying the duties, but on simplifications and things like that. I've seen the role of Express. The Express industry is huge because the Express industry is extremely exposed. When you are in the middle of a fraudulent flow, you don't. That's not the place you want to be in, because at some point, enforcement authorities are going to try to get duties from you or to make you responsible for placing dangerous goods on the EU market here. And so that I've seen. The making platforms responsible, to me, is the way forward, because they are the only ones that have an influence on what is sold. They can remove the reference, so there needs to be incentives for them to only have good references. And that's by today, if you look at the nitty-gritty of who's liable, ultimately the customer representatives could be in Europe for product compliance today. How is that going to move the needle? 5 years after the importation, you take a representative, you bring him to jail because he has imported dangerous goods in 2025. It's not going to make anything safer. While you tell the platforms, don't do that. They won't. And so I think the way forward is that.
Thank you, and I've gotten the signal that we've run out of time. So with that, thank you so much to the panelists. I really appreciate all of your time here. And thank you to the audience. Thank you so much for coming out today. Yeah.
We're going to go right into our lunchtime keynote with